from my perspective, having lived with it my whole life, it's not necessarily in the forefront of my mind, because I've never experienced anything different. So it's quite easy to limit yourself, but I wouldn't say that it's on a day-to-day basis. There isn't necessarily anything it stops me doing. So I'm quite lucky in that respect. Wouldn't be able to run a marathon or something like that. I underwent a aortic repair, aortic mesh I think I had, and a mitral valve repair summer of 2019. And I had 2 lensectomies, one on each eye, hence the glasses and the contact lenses.
Marfan impacts my day-to-day life significantly, really, because I just feel like my everyday life is centered around trying to manage chronic pain, loose joints, POTS, fatigue, and everything else that just comes alongside and coexists with Marfan syndrome. There's so many ailments and symptoms that people don't realise you have that Marfan causes. In the morning when I'm stood up and I'm trying to do my hair or trying to dry my hair after I've washed it, just doing that brings on my POTS symptoms, or it brings on like my chronic pain just because standing up causes backache, or my knees will start aching and I'll literally just have to sit down halfway through.
And POTS is a postural tachycardia.
Postural tachycardia syndrome. Basically just means like when you stood up in a postural position, it brings on these symptoms until you sit down again.
And for instance, a shower is a very intimidating prospect for you because
it triggers the symptoms of POTS. It just flares up the fast heart rate, and the dizziness gets really bad, and I just start like sweating really bad. So until I like come out of the step out of the shower and then go and lie down for half an hour, the symptoms won't calm down unless I do that.
Something like that affects the whole family, and it affected family life in many ways. And I would say it was experienced differently by each family member. Certainly for me as mum, I was thinking about risk assessments in almost everything we did to be sure that it was safe and manageable, not just for him, but for all of us. I was always thinking ahead, choosing things that everyone could do, or thinking of ways that we could adapt them so that we could all enjoy and succeed at what we were doing. Monitoring and managing all 3 areas of the medical, educational and social needs. Positively, we made the most of provision from the charities, and there are some fantastic memories buried in there.
Yeah, so I think touching upon the more daily life, normal interactions for a child, me and Matthew went to the same schools together, although we're 3 years apart. But I remember growing up, going through school, teachers, parents, students, friends, the comment, "Why is he so tall?" was probably made about, I don't know, so many times throughout our time at school. And his height, his build and his frame were centre of attention pretty much everywhere he went, anywhere. Well, whoever he was with was always curious, there were questions, and I think I didn't register it at the time, but looking back now, it's interesting to see, especially from the teachers, that they didn't register, they didn't pick up the fact that this wasn't just an anomaly, but it was an extreme. And I think the insensitivity and obviously the difficulties that he faced on top of normal things that you deal with as a child was definitely exacerbated by his condition.
I had to take early retirement when I think I was 52. I'd started to have a lot of problems as a nursery nurse with osteoarthritis, dural ectasia, and the fatigue. The fatigue began, I suppose it was always there, but as I got older, it began to feel like a brick wall in front of me. And you couldn't see it and you couldn't explain it. You'd say you were tired, but you just couldn't climb over it. You couldn't push it to one side. So the fatigue became unbearable. My work colleagues and management team were amazing. They supported me until I retired. I take a lot of medication. I spend my days with my husband. We tend to do things on a morning. If I need to go shopping, or I'm going to meet a friend, or going for a walk, we do it on a morning, because by after lunch, I'm so tired. I tend to just put my feet up, read a book, watch TV. I'm alone with my thoughts a lot, and I've always felt and still feel terrible guilt that I passed Marfan syndrome unknowingly onto my 3 children. I have gorgeous grandchildren. It saddens me now that I can't get down onto the floor to play with them, and I can't have them over for sleepovers because I'm on so many medications, which also make you sleepy. So you cope with the fatigue, and then you cope with the medications. But I give the best cuddles and I read the best stories, so we do that together. But the great thing was that finding out when my children were so young, we could get the help and support from all the doctors we needed. 2 of my 3 children plus myself have had aortic root replacements since then. Last year, I was lucky enough to have the lenses in both eyes replaced. And for the very first time in my life, I can now see raindrops. I can see the patterns on a butterfly's wings. I can see the stripes on a bumblebee. And it's just the most amazing thing.
She goes to preschool, so travelling to and from preschool, at the moment, we are still using a pushchair that everybody uses, but because they're not designed very well, she is too tall for it. So when you put the hood over, her head sticks out the hood. She's too heavy for it. And also people do comment because they think that she's older than she is. When we go to the park and you see that other mums get to sit and have a little chin wag, but with Amaya, I have to be there all the time. I have to make sure, even on the slide, when she's climbing on things, because she falls all the time, she obviously slips, she knocks into things more, there's more children running around. So if she does bash into a child, she won't just she will fall. So I have to have my eye on her 24/7.
I chose to live with it very quietly, so very few people knew, and I think that's the way I dealt with it, and that had a lot to do with my career, that I was able to quietly continue. But it did put a lot of restrictions in my place. 4 years ago, I had elective surgery in 2016, and that actually enabled me to be more open about it, because I couldn't sort of be quiet of the fact that I was disappearing into hospital and not going to be out of circulation. So from that point on, I went and started saying, yeah, this is me, this is what I have, I've been living with it, I'm now going to have a surgery. And it didn't really change anything. And one of the big things for me is, when I look back at my life, it just was not part of my younger life. And yet at school, you could argue that I was being bullied, I was different to everyone else. Sports, I'm totally an uncoordinated person. So on the sports field, I never got chosen to be in the team. And my mother seemed to understand that her 2 boys should not be, were different, although she didn't know at all why that was. So she protected us, and you could be overprotective. So although I would be a disaster on the rugby field and a disaster on the football field, and become scared myself, but maybe it's because of mother, I just didn't participate in it. So I gave up, and I'm not a very competitive person, and I'm still not a very competitive person. Everything seemed so much more difficult for me.